is the bonus episode of the meta. The only thing more exciting than bonus meta is bonus James Moorhouse. Hello, James.
Hi, Jay. It's been too long.
It has. I am your host, Jay Larson, and James has informed me that he has a surprise question for me to start off, so let's jump in.
Jay, my question for you, and thank you for coming to my podcast, is...
Yes.
We have talked about how this update is really exciting for veteran players and potentially returning players. And you mentioned, when we were chatting offline, Chain Attack. I've heard rumblings that there might be one Trevor Christensen lining up for a game with you. Can you confirm if this is true and any details you can share?
So I asked Trevor if the update would be enough to convince him to play a game with me, and he said yes. And then later on, he made like kind of an offhand comment / joke about how it was going to be like everything else, and he will say that he'll play, but when it actually comes time to leave his house, that will be the bridge too far. So I am cautiously optimistic because I am a fool.
You got my hopes up, and then you just went straight off a cliff. Thank you for nothing, Jay Larson.
Well, welcome to life, James.
All right.
I am hopeful. I think that there's some stuff is horn that he's wanting to give us a spin.
Yeah. I know a lot of Chain Attack tragics would be very hopeful.
Yeah. Yeah, it would be, obviously if we did, we would talk about it on Chain Attack, and that'd be pretty fun in my opinion. So, fingers crossed.
Yeah.
Well, James, do you know what time it is?
It's circle time!
It is. It's time for Bennett to share his questions.
Oh, good. Can we speed round?
His first one is...
So many amazing questions. Not because they're shit.
Is Circle Christmas finally over? LOL.
Definitely not. If there was ever a Circle Christmas, this would be the year to celebrate, where all the family animals are coming around to it, because... oh my god, living beast in this update, what the fuck?
So that leads into his follow-up question. If the answer is no, and Circle Christmas is not over, aren't you ashamed? Underline, exclamation point, question. And I think I speak for the rest of the community in emphasizing this question. Shouldn't Circle players just kind of be embarrassed and ashamed at this point?
Look, I've done my time. Personally, so no.
Oh, okay.
Absolutely,
what?
Absolutely not. No, I actually do think that we should be slightly ashamed, but I'll just hold up I'll bear the flag for the faction.
I guess what you mentioned, the living war beasts. Are there any other reasons why you feel like this is a great time to be a Circle player?
Not particularly. It's really I think about the game as a whole and playing with friends and stuff, and so I'm really excited for the whole game. I'm excited to see friends that were on the fence come back, those who were already engaged, really excited, and an opportunity for new people to jump in as well. So all of those ticks. I think the most exciting thing for Circle is definitely, like, we only have 4 themes, which is actually a small compared to the other factions who all seem to have 5 or more. But 3 of them were very playable. Devourer's Host was a game-defining faction for a while. Bones is really strong, and Secret Masters obviously allowed us access to all the minions and Riot Quest stuff. Wild Hunt was terrible. It was basically unplayable. I would now think that if you saw a Circle player win an event, you could tell me it was any 2 the current themes, whether it's double Wild Hunt or double Devourer's Host or Bones and Secret Masters, any combination, and I'd be like, yep, fair enough that they won an event. Like, they're all really playable, really exciting spot to be. My fear is that they're just over, but we'll wait and see.
So next question from Ben Up, he says, haven't looked in depth at Circle, Grymkin, or Infernal since the update dropped. Can you give us some highlights?
Yeah, so Infernals highlights really quickly are that I'm actually looking at Malakov, which makes me feel a bit disgusting. But he's very good with his new Discombobulate spell and things like Crows and Howlers. The most exciting change to Infernals, they didn't really have much happen. They got a few more War Horror points on their 2 out of 3 of their casters, but Regnar you now have to pay for. So basically nothing happened. Except with the heavies going down to armor 18, I think if you think about, let's just say you lose 6 heavies over the course of the game, and I think they have 25 health each. That's 150 health that you just lost. So I think that you might need to start just looking into some other potential builds, basically the Harvester and the Guardian centric. But Hearts of Darkness is really exciting, and what I'm really excited about is the Covenant 2 with Fiora 3 and Fiora 4, which, if you don't know, it basically gives them a big sprint. Or it can actually make them play a bit more aggressively. And then, opens up a new lease of life to Fiora, especially with the changes to Howlers getting cheaper and doing a bit more damage on the charge.
So, real quick, before we leave Infernals, I guess I have a quick question on them. I saw the changes to Infernals, and, they're exactly what you said. And I guess kind of my concern or fear about Infernals is that they're, other than Travis Marg, that there's going to be no one playing them, because they were already in a little bit of a lull after the last set of nerfs that they had, and now, most people play multiple factions that are playing competitively, and I think the natural tendency that people are going to have is, X faction, my Menoth, or my, whatever, they just got a bunch of buffs. My Living Warbeast and Circle are really cool now. I'm going to go play them instead of the Infernals, which just got hit with another nerf. And so I'm a little worried that they're just going to fall off the face of the earth and we're not going to see anyone playing them. Do you think my fears are overblown, or do you think that there's a good chance that's going to happen?
Yeah, good observation. So I think as a trend, you're probably correct, but I don't think it'll be the end of the earth. So a couple of things. I think that you won't default see Double Dark Legacy as a great pairing anymore. I think it will still be very good, but when you take into account all the debuffs that have happened over the last couple of months, i.e. Tormentors going from Mat 7 to Mat 6, Armor dropping for the crabs by 1, Hawk getting nerfed, then it's starting to become less appealing. But some of those as well are not as overblown as they should be. The gimmick that the faction is still designed around, which is summoning a heavy every turn, is still very strong. I think it just forces you to play a slightly, either really faster or really slower game. You've got to pick which way you want to go. You're going to overwhelm them with 3 or 4 extra heavies by the time you engage, or you're going to just try and rush them, essentially. But I think that Mat 6 Tormentors, look, we've got Mat 8 on a stick from Runewood, we've got rerolls from Oren and Eilish, we've got Synergy, we've got Black Spot, we've got a lot of things that make them very good anyway. So I think some of the fears of how much they've been nerfed have been overblown, especially the Tactician faction thing was dumb. That shouldn't be a rule. And so I think Hawk's actually super powerful if you keep him in one list. So just personally, as an example, I'm taking Agathon with a Harvester, Zadaroth as per normal, but I actually liked Snakes with her anyway, so I'm playing Snakes with her because Def 16 under the feet is really good, and then the Guardian under Amadeus. But there's lots of room to experiment now with those 2 Colossals. They're really well designed, and if you listen to the first podcast, they align to my idea of sort of utility and support, as well as a DPS sort of Colossal. So lots to explore. The weird part about them is Hearts of Darkness. It's not really. I quite like it in terms of the options it gives you to explore. I've got a full Lucas army. I've got full Fiora armies, and I'm even on the cusp of making a Malakov army. The thing is, if a new player were to start the game and jump into Infernals, I'd be just stick with Dark Legacy. Don't go and explore Hearts of Darkness. So I don't know if they already make you do some weird purchasing habits. They kind of seem like I've got 1 or 2 main factions. I'm now just going to buy my little expansion kits for my Infernals, which is my Menoth expansion or my Crucible Guard expansion or whatever. That, with all the new stuff out there, I wouldn't be surprised if it was a second or third priority. But once the updates have time to settle and people have time to explore, I wouldn't be surprised if we saw, a suitable amount of Infernals appearing. Does it really matter if they are slightly under or slightly overrepresented. Probably not. It's more if they become dominant or don't exist at all. That's the issue, and I don't think that will happen, is my prediction.
All right, so high-level overview, still have Circle and Grymkin left.
Sure. Yes, that was Infernals. Grymkin, the biggest change was the one that came after the initial announcement of the nerfs. Drop. Let's try again. The actual changes to the death knell, that it gets a corpse in every theme now is so basically now everything in Grymkin is super playable outside of one or two very minor exceptions. It might Hollow Man or Fright Man. So yeah, super playable. You still see the list. I still don't think you'll see as much King of Nothing as you will the other casters, and I wouldn't be surprised to see Wanderer and a shitload of Dreadrots rise to the top. Circle, you will see a massive shift over to Wild Hunt, even though Bones of Orboros, which is already a good theme, got essentially like an extra 12 or so free points. But yes, definitely the main change for Circle is obviously it's all three of these things happening at once. It's Kruger 0 bringing +2 strength and reach on a stick, which both +2 strength is amazing, but giving reach to things like Ferals and Riphorns and even Loki, and even the Stalker Fist and Getorix's bite attacks is really, really good in isolation. In isolation, I was like i.e. before the big announcement, I was like, look, that's probably too good, but it's let down by the fact that Wild Hunt is pretty bad. Then they brought in the Primal Change, which is pretty ballistic. So now you have +1 to hit, +3 on a stick. And then all the heavies got +1 strength. So you've kind of got +1, +4 on a stick now without any dice required. Then you're going to see a bit more of the Kayas, Kaya 2 and 3 as well, I think, as well as Chromac 2 because he runs heavy really well. And they have +2 strength on a stick between Forced Evolution and Chromac 2's feet and Synergy, +3. So now you got +1, +6 on a stick. Then add in things like A, they're cheaper, so they're going to force multiply. And B, just as an example, I don't think armor values really went up across the board anywhere outside of things like the Dwarf Jacks. And if anything, they actually went down. If you look at something like Tormentors and Desolators, they actually went down. So now, quite often, I'm exaggerating, this is the extreme now, you've got +1, +7 on a stick against things like Tormentors, that a Stalker will just, essentially Circle Living War Beasts now have Death Touch. When they have +1, +4 on a, to use a magic term, yeah, they have death touch, which I'm not sure is good for the game. The final piece of that puzzle is, especially with Stalkers, Wild Hunt, you cast Animus for 1 less, so Primal goes down from 2 to 1, and then Sprint on a Stalker goes from 1 to 0. So a Stalker can go in, kill infantry because of Berserk, kill a heavy because it's strength 1,000,000 now. It's literally strength 23, without any sort of crazy circumstances, just Primal plus. It seems a bit across the head and just sprint away for free. The one saving grace is that if you catch them, they die, because Def 14 and Armor 17 is not what it used to be. So, they are now the fastest, they hit the hardest, they're the most maneuverable. It's just that they're not the most survivable when they get touched, which is totally fine. You can't be the best in class at everything or you break the game. So, short version, sorry, a bit of a tangent, but I wouldn't be surprised to see Wild Hunt in at least one of every 2 Circle lists, and Bones of Orboros would have been up there if it wasn't completely overshadowed by how good this is. So I wouldn't be surprised to see Devourer's Host fall off just a little bit, because it didn't really get any buffs, and if anything, it got a few nerfs into things like Wolf Rider Champions not becoming a requisition point anymore, Kogum the same, etc. And Secret Masters in a similar boat, in that some of their amazing requisition points have fallen off, like Scythe. So that's the high level overview. Wild Hunt stonks.
All right, so I guess one of my own follow-up questions with this is that in our conversations that we've had between the two of us, one of the things that you've said is that one of the aspects of the game that you find less interesting is when there's a caster where it's kind of like the weight of my math is going to overwhelm you, whether it's, I'm getting these ludicrous amounts of armor or defense, etc., or, my 2 hit and damage values are so high that I can just wipe you off the board.
We call it numbers machine.
Yeah, numbers machine, as opposed to decisions over placement or other tactical decisions that you might be making. Do you have any concerns that this update is going to lend itself to numbers machine becoming a primary or an important way that people are playing the game?
Yeah. Short answer is yes. For me, when this game was at its absolute, was when control was in the game, and it was an elegant and finesse component of the game. So what I mean as an example by that was often with Circle, the absolute highest PS you could get to was when you primal a Stalker, and cast Curse of Shadows on something, plus it warps strength. So it goes from 16 to 18 to 20 to 22 to 22. And you're basically throwing your piece away at that point. There were often things that you just could not fight, whether, like, Striker 1's feat is kind of like a time walk. You couldn't really fight a lot of things without Primal, which made you go, well, if I'm going in on this, I'm going kind of all in. It's all or nothing. And so that kind of defined the way that your army would play. Often what you would have to do is find a different type of out rather than just brute forcing it. So whether that is Druids used to have a push and a pull spell, now it's just a push spell. So normally you'd have to pull something into an awkward position of your opponent, or trade against it slightly differently, or jump into its back arc, or whatever. Or you could use a Shadow Horn to leap and jump and weapon lock. So what I'm getting at is there was, to use a Magic analogy, blue being the controlling color. There's a lot less blue in, and the direction I see the game go is continually that way. As an example, Madrak Zero now can give essentially +2 armor to something and +4 armor if he can get a kill off himself. So it's like, yes, there are elements of that are elegant, that you need to position him so that he can get a kill and he can trigger his little unique Quillstone buff. However, at the end of the day, the smartest thing to kind of just put Bracer on one of the kings, and now you've got an armor 23. So I don't like this sort of arms race of numbers. I prefer the elegance of the blue control type in the game, rather than just giving factions more red and green gruel. Magic analogy, if that works. We've seen that continue over the game as well, with control becoming less and less prevalent. Halo 2 keeps getting nerfed, and again, another missed opportunity. I think I would have loved to see Druids get their push and pull, sorry. Instead, they lost 3 points, and now they're this weird spam infantry where it's 7 points for 6 of them, and a 4-point UA. What's their identity? What's happening? That's a bit of a shame. So I'd love to see some more dimensions of the game explored, rather than number machine continuing to be pushed. To reiterate, it's definitely still a very good game. I play some other games and nothing still compares to War Machine. However, I'd love it to go from good to great, and I'd love that to be introduced. I think that maybe that ship has sailed. Do
you think that when I think about the times that you're kind of thinking about, it seems to me that one of the fundamental changes in the game that kind of led away from some of the control stuff was the changes to Steamroller, where you're going to have 7 rounds. You have to be up by, it's not just the first to 5. You have to be up by 5 points. Things of that nature. Did that seem like a turning point to you with the game, or am I guess kind of misanalyzing things?
No, I think they've done a lot. So to continue the Magic analogy, while they've removed blue from the game largely, I guess I should just rehash this really quickly. In Magic, there are 5 colors. Red is like fire aggression, green is like natural numbers and sort of inherent raw power, or powered by synergy. White is sort of like law and power, essentially by synergy again, but through sort of like cohesion and
defense and healing and
yeah, a bit more healing and stuff. And then black is sort of the cumulative, kill one of my own guys to kill 2 of yours kind of thing. Blue being the control elements, the counter spell. So taking that, while I think that blue has largely been removed as much, like a lot, not entirely, but a lot, that they've done a very good job of keeping the red, green, white, and black elements of the game healthy and interactive, so that it hasn't just been like rock, paper, scissors. Oh, we've removed scissors, so everyone's going to play paper when they run into rock. It's not that. I think there's still enough dimensions of the game that is super interesting, and that's why we're all here talking, excited for it and playing it. It's just it does feel like one of the 5 pillars has sort of been ripped out, but that things like Steamroller going from first to up by 5 rather than first to 5. Have definitely helped. I took a bit of a break in that period as well, and I came back, and that was completely new, and that was super refreshing. That was a great change. So well done to them on sort of keeping the game revolving around those 4 colors instead of 5.
I mean, I think that overall it has been probably a popular change because I think that
it's an everybody insult.
Well, I mean, most people. A lot of it could feel super stinging when you played a game and you lost the game. There weren't really ever any attack rolls made in the course of the game, things like that. So
yeah, anyway. There's nothing worse than being locked out by Denny 2 and then you don't do anything until the game's over. Versus like that kind of still does exist though. There are some scenarios where I think there's still one where you can score 5 points in a turn if you're not careful. So, no, it was bunkers. They've removed that, but I think you can actually score 5 in a turn if you can control it. So that's the 2 flags in the middle and a zone and an objective on either side. So if you control both flags, kill their objective, control their zone, and control your zone, you can score 5 in a turn, but that's super hard. I'd just love to see any of those sort of like, I blitz you in 1 turn and it's game over effects, and I think they are largely gone. So to that extent.
Okay. All right. Well, next question from Ben Up. He says, what are some areas that you'd like to see some additional improvement?
I think that's like a pretty good segue. I'd love to see some control come back. So example, druids get push and pull. Ran comes back a little bit, and he actually is allowed to play his battle mages in the theme. That would have been nice. Now you kind of, if you want to play him, you still have to play out a theme, which again I think is a missed opportunity. So really the blue elements of the game. I'd also love to see just some consistency in how we approach the sort of friendly faction theme thing that we've seen recently. So, for example, Hearts of Darkness, every model Infernal, Vengeance of Dunia, every model is either a troll or a minion, and now trolls can play minions, can play trolls, whereas Circle Secret Masters just have a theme where you can take minions and they're not friendly faction. So it just seems a little inconsistent. Perhaps we could have a generic theme where you're allowed to take basically you can play out a theme, but you get rec points, but you don't get a theme bonus or something, which leads me into a broader conversation. The game might be too big. I think 75 with an extra 10 to 20% discount that we've seen, I think it might be too big. So whether it becomes move rec points entirely, and you can play in a theme if you want and you get a benefit like corpses on your Tharn, or you just don't. Maybe that's enough for it to stand on its own 2 legs and it pulls 15 points out of the game again. Or maybe even, I mean, no one will agree to this, but maybe we move to 60 points or something. It'd be interesting to see where that heads, because the game, again, yet to be tested. Maybe now the fact that we're all playing heavy lists and a lot of units, but mainly heavies means that our clock management goes down. But overall, I think we're pushing 2 biggies. So
yeah, I mean, one of I would say my biggest concern about this update was that I had felt like the game size and the game length and people playing to turn 7 and it being like, you go to an event and you play, multiple rounds of these long attrition fests. It seemed like it was just dialing too far in that direction. And by far my biggest concern about the update was, if it was going to be getting even bigger. And I asked Faye about that, and she said that it felt to her like it kind of balanced out with the requisition options going down. And yes, point costs are going down, but that kind of balances out between the requisition options. But I think most people are ending up with lists that are a little bit bigger than before, and I don't think that I consider that to be a good thing.
I know it's on our radar. So I've listened to her on a couple of podcasts now. She did one with the Chaosborn guys as well, which is great. And look, I think that Faye's doing all the right things in terms of the watch list, the things that are on her radar, etc. But in terms of how big a list is, I disagree entirely. Like I've written 20 lists. The only ones that didn't get significantly bigger are my Dark Legacy lists, and that's because they were basically unchanged. So, yeah, I agree. And I think she said on the Chaosborn podcast as well, she said the game is about one repawn too big. so yeah, it's definitely on the radar. So that's why I keep, anything that I've been sort of like, yeah, it's a good change, this is a good direction, 6 or 7 out of 10 on the way forward. The fact that she's got this on her mind and she's not unwilling to make changes in the next 3 to 6 to 9 months, fantastic. You get an upgrade to like an 8 or a 9 out of 10 because it's the right way forward. So
yeah,
exciting, but it'll be interesting to see how the couple of months pan out. Especially you guys have Warfare by the time people are listening to this, Warfare weekend in a couple of days.
Yeah. I'm going to real quick insert my own question into this. Let's say that
you're allowed.
James
Moorhouse, you're the podcast overlord. You're allowed to do that.
Excellent. I'm going to be mad with power with you telling me that, James. So let's say that you were in a few days going to be attending Warfare weekend. What strategy would you take going into this event? Would you be trying to do something completely new that people are unfamiliar with? Would you be refining the list that you've already been working on? Something else?
So I still think that one of the game is so large that you still need to take good generalists, play by good principles, have a game, give yourself at least a game into everything, unless you want to play whatever is the number one list in the game at the moment, and nobody actually knows what that is right now, which is exciting. So if I were going to Warfare weekend, I would be playing one list which is a little bit of a safety blanket, taking benefits of the new changes. So for me, I think that would be Kruger 2, but in Bones, because Bones just got a shitload of points, so it's just more of something that you're used to. So there's that. And then number 2, I would definitely be taking Wild Hunt. So for me, at the moment, that's either Kaya 2 or Chromac 1, or possibly even Una 2, because she got a couple of upgrades. And she still runs Griffins well. So yeah, Kruger 2, Bones, Chromac 1, probably, Wild Hunt with the new Kruger 0, and trying to shock people with how awesome my beasts are. Yeah.
Any predictions on what you think is going to be the outcome of Warfare Weekend?
I would love for Living Circle Beasts to have a win, but I've kind of moved away recently from saying, this list that went X and O is awesome, because in a game with so many changes, so many variables, so many different skill levels, so many different people playing, and then so many things that are just decided by what might end up just being a coin flip at the end of the game, given, the 100 excellent decisions that it took to even get you to that spot. The fact that we say this person won this game, therefore they're better, is just it's actually kind of a bit of a toxic way of looking at things. That example is really good, where you might have made 100 excellent decisions in a row to get yourself to a position where you have essentially what boils down to a 50-50, right? So how can we say that that's not good? How can we say, he lost the final and does this? It reminds me of when I lost the CanCon final with the new Bradigus to Billy Crookshanks I had a 50%er in what were absolutely ridiculous circumstances that no other caster would even have a 50%er to kill his caster Scar. And I didn't pull it off, and people were like, so Bradigus is fine. It's no, that's not okay. And also, I thought about it afterwards, and I'm if I'd done this slightly differently, it's actually more like an 80-90%er. So, no, that's not how I look at it. So I'd like Circle to do well. I'd like Heavy War Beasts to do well to justify my position on them, but I don't like making that those kind of sweeping statements. What do you think?
I think the outcome that would disappoint me the most would be a Strange Bedfellows one.
Yes, I think we can all agree on. The other one I don't want to see is just any type of spam list win. I don't want to see 60 Temple Guard win, if that's a thing. Yeah. I don't want to see 9 Rapons win, because I don't think it represents when the game is at its healthiest and best.
Sure. All right, so...
Fuck that list.
Next question from Ben Up. He says, up until the update, I felt like Solo Machine was the way to go, with power solos like Scythe or the Warden Executioner being so obviously powerful that their exclusion would surely be madness. Has this changed with the modifications done to point costs and requisition options in your factions?
In my factions, yeah. So like that example, I think you still take Wardens, you just don't auto pick them as your option. You don't pay for 4 in a ret list. In terms of my factions, it's definitely changed a bit. So just quickly, in terms of Devourer's Host, you can't take a free Wolf Rider champion, but you're still taking free Lord of the Feast because he's now 5 points, and Chieftains, which is good, but you're not getting a free Kogan or Wolf Rider champ. So it's come down a smidge there. The one I think could have stayed as a requisition point, especially for trolls, is the Junior Archon, because it fits into that support role. It is probably best in class, it is probably one, but it could have sort of fit into that design principle of 5-point combat solos and 6-point or more support solos. There are also some lists where they just don't get 5-point options, like it's 3 or 4 points. So I'm quite often finding, I don't know why the Black Clad is 3 points, but it is now. And I quite often find I'm requisitioning. So for Circle, what that looks like is it's almost automatically always Kruger 0 is one of the requisition points because he's A, 5 points, and B, insane. And then, depending on the list, it's often Chuck Dogwood and one Black Clad or a unit attachment or whatever. In Infernals, it changes slightly, but not much at all. It's really now you're paying for Regna, which is compensated by the extra Warjack points from your casters. And now you're just requisitioning in a third 5-point solo or one of your 4-point solos, Lauren 2, Roger, or whatever. In Hearts of Darkness, it's slightly different because you have to take Mark Souls or Umbrals. So often it's still Eilish and Umbral, and then it just kind of depends whether you're taking Hermit or Ruined Will, how the list is constructed. And then finally in Grymkin, Bump remains largely untouched because often it was 2 Malady Men, so you're taking 2 Malady Men as 2 of your requisition points, and then your third. I'm finding I'm not actually putting in Lord Longfellow much, which is sad because I think he's cool, but it's often the Wormwood because A, it's new and shiny, and B, it's 5 points. And then it's still largely unchanged in Dark Menagerie in that you're taking 2 Gremlin Swarms as one of your choices and a mixture of 4 and 5 point solos. So, yeah, in terms of the lists that I were building, largely unchanged outside of Kogan and a couple of 6-point Merc solos. In terms of other factions, I think you're seeing this drop down to, I guess, Blackbloods as well, but this drop down to 3.5 on average points for a requisition point. So there's still the odd exception, like in Kador as well. I think you can take 2 tankers, Man of War tankers, and 1 suppression guy or whatever it is, and that ends up being 6, 6, and 5 points for 17. So that's one of the consistencies I'd like to see addressed a little bit more. But overall, that's it.
Next question from Ben Up. He says, which factions do you think gained the most from the update changes?
Just real quick, I think Kador is really interesting. I never thought I'd live in a time where I thought double Cossacks were a thing. Menoth has done pretty well, but some of their requisition points suck. Circle's obviously in a really good spot. I think Scorn is a lot more playable across the board. Crix just got a pretty healthy uplift. I'd love to see changes to things like Nightmare, as our good friend Aaron Whale would complain about, but is overall very excited about. Grymkin are great. I don't know why anyone's complaining about Grymkin. Yeah, it's really just, it's more of a question of the opposite, and I just don't think you're going to see much Signar, but hopefully Signar players disagree and they love it.
This isn't one that you listed off, but I will admit that I'm still excited to get some trolls on the table.
Oh yeah, so. Yeah, trolls are a winner. Trolls are a winner from this update. The one I'm pissed off about is Fire of Salvation is the most insane Jack in the game. Why did he lose a point? Why? I'm super excited to see Death Jack and Behemoth. Those Jacks are iconic. Get them back.
Yeah. Okay, next question from Ben Up is Kruger 2 still as degenerate as always?
Degenerate. The Windstorm thing does a little bit to keep him in line, but look, his Bones of Orboros list gained like 12 points, so he can still be the best TK caster in the game. And I think you start looking at things like Wild Hunt. You can still take Geomancers in there, so you can just add an extra 2 inch of threat. on your heavies. He's still good. I think he's just the gap between, the top 5 casters in the game and everyone else has just been reduced slightly. So, yeah, really good, really exciting. Also, you can't take him with Kruger 0, so he can't be that.
Yes.
I can't believe people thought Kruger 0 was the worst 0 Warlock, because every list I can put him in, i.e. not Devourer's Host, he's the first thing that goes in every time, and I'm +2 strength, reach on a stick, 2 lightning storm guns for 1. He casts 2 lightning storms with his gun for a cost of 1 fury to reload. That have +2 range and have synergy with the Storm Raptor, which is already a great beast, plus a Cloud Wall, plus anti-range tech, all for a single rec point. Insanity. That's the degenerate. Kruger is degenerate. Kruger 2 is not degenerate as his version of himself.
Yeah. All right, so next question from Bennett. He says, what are your thoughts on some of the outliers since the update? Are they still an issue or a little bit more manageable? Thinking of, or he says manageable. They're obviously a little bit more manageable, but so the examples he gives are Asphyxius 4, Aurora 2 Strange Bedfellows, Orion plus Tesselators, Falseer, Lucas, Vindicators, ...
Yeah, okay, cool. Those are good examples. So some of those brought in line a little bit, yet to see if they work out. Some of those still need to stay on the watch list and have been mentioned in the watch list. So specifically those examples, Gatsby has been brought back in line a bit, and I like that there's less of this we hate living models for no reason rule, as in he lost, that's good. That's good change. And bringing his armor down a little bit is good. I'm still a bit worried about his personal output, but we will see. What was the second example after Gatsby in there? Was it Strange Bedfellows?
Aurora 2 Strange Bedfellows, Orion Tesselators, Falseer, Lucas, Vindicators.
Yeah, cool. Okay, so touching on each of those super briefly. Strange Bedfellows, I think, went from S+ to S. It's still very, very good. It's just the fact that you can't spam the angels anymore, which helps a little bit. I am still worried about that list, but it hasn't had as much time in the wild due to the pandemic, so good that it's still sort of on the watch list. Tessellator's got a points drop, and they're actually on the watch list for another points drop, so, and by that I mean point increase. And so that's excellent. Good. Again, anything that can be spammed needs to stay on a watch list forever, basically, until anything changes. So, go out and play it so that we have more data on it, because I'd love to see it changed if it's fucked. But they definitely got a bit of a buff with the changes to minimum gun ranges. So they basically ignore minimum gun ranges now, almost. So yeah, would be keen to keep an eye on them. Falseer. Falseer is an interesting one. I think that she actually got a side grade. Her personal assassination potential reduced a bit, but then everything else increased a bit. So I still think she could be Rhett's best caster. And then Vindicators. Vindicators should have got a points increase. So yeah, that's one I would love to stay on the watch list, and that's a good example. I'll tell you what though, my Hearts of Darkest Lucas, which I was super in love with, basically the change to that after all was said and done is that I lost one of my 2 mentalists and gained a mechanic. So like I lost 2 points or 3 points or whatever. So that was a pretty uninspired change. I'm not as keen to get him on the table. And I'm saying that Vindicator should be nerfed on top of that. So it will be interesting to see sort of where they land. But Vindicators were a smooth criminal. Those things are they're so mindless. They fit into our conversation earlier about blue, right? Like, there are no decision points with that jack. You spend 1 for powerful attack, which means that if you're shooting a troll champ brick, now you're getting boosted power 10s that have no tough. If you're shooting a heavy warjack, you say, I hate not living models. I hate construct models, and you get an extra die, and everything's fully boosted. Like, there's no finesse or elegance to them. They're just, I press the button and profit. So yeah, unfortunately they were in the most recent CID, I believe. So yeah. Watch list those.
Next question from Ben up. He basically asked, do you think that with the Archon adjustments, did they get basically nerfed too much to where they're not going to be taken much at this point?
I like how he basically said, like paraphrasing, because he loves a good long question, Bennett. Okay, so I don't think, again, it's a bit of a cop-out answer, but I don't think I have enough data. So I went from putting 2 Death Archons in every Secret Masters list to, I think I've got 1 in 1 list. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with the buffed ones, like the Thammarite, that might now even be the best Archon. The others, I think they're largely in a healthy space of some lists will have 1, even less lists will have 2. And they are starting to head towards sort of a rate at which they appear that reflects their point costs. Because we were just seeing them all the time, forever and ever, for everything. So now I think there are actual meaningful decision costs, not just because their points increased or their values decreased, but also because the world around them changed. So often a lot of the new things that you would see in Secret Masters, as an example, is anything that is the new minion stuff that's available to everyone, because it's just like basically a power creep. Anything that is newer will be slightly more valuable on the battlefield. So it speaks to how good a change like this is, that some of those models that have been sitting on the shelf for a long time are not getting any love, and I can look at my entire Circle Living roster largely. You can now pull those out rather than having to go and buy, here's Nemo 5 or Chromac 3 or whatever the latest thing is. It's a shake-up to existing stuff. So whatever the change ends up looking like for Archons on the table, I'm excited to see if some of the old stuff can sort of counter them. Yeah.
Next question from Bennett. He says, do you think that the next phase of the game going forward is going to be infantry machine, solo machine, warjacker, warbeast machine, or balanced lists, or something different?
It's probably slightly different for each faction. So, for example, Circle, I think you'll see more living warbeasts. Their infantry didn't really get the buffs that it needed. In fact, I don't think that there are any Circle lists where you're going to start putting infantry on the table that wasn't previously there. In mass, you might see it in isolation, like I've got a unit of Reeves in a list and a unit of Wolves of Orboros in a list, but not any Skinwalkers. And then anything that was already seeing play isn't probably going to increase for Circle. So things like, the only thing that might go up is Death Wolves. But things like Tharn Ravagers or Bloodpack or whatever, I don't think they'll go up because the other changes to the faction are so good. Over in something like Grymkin, you'll see a bit more Dreadrots. In Infernals, you probably won't see an increase in little shooty guys who now whose name I've forgotten. What are the little shooty guys called that no one takes in Infernals? Oh my god. Grievers. Grievous Swarm. I don't think you'll see any more of them. You might see a unit of Howlers in Dark Legacy. You'll probably see more in Hearts of Darkness. So for the 3 factions I play, more of a lean towards heavies, and in Grymkin, solos only because the Witchwood changed and heavies went down a bit, so not really a major change there. In other factions, maybe I think there will be more over in the War Machine side of things. I think you'll see a bit more. I think you'll see a few more units in Trolls as well. Trolls have really like a nice blend. My mate Tomo was running a Magic 3 list with a unit of Fen Blades, a unit of Creel Warriors, a unit of Champions, and a unit of Long Riders. Like all 4, the just a really nice balance of the OGs, right? So I think it's a faction buff. What I would just slight side note, what I would love to see Infernals is a 4th master that runs infantry really well and has spells to, yes, look, their gimmick of summoning a heavy every turn is still going to be faction defining, but gimmick's not good, but a spell list that accommodates playing more infantry. So that might be Battle Lust for Howlers. If you have an Infernal master with Battle Lust, you can really only put it on Howlers unless you want to put it on Cultists. And so that will encourage people to take Howlers whilst not stopping them from bringing, summoning heavies. And then something maybe like Repo, like Tax Supremacy. So your Grievers can actually shoot and then Repo. And a feat that somehow, helps that or does something. Point being, I'd like to see, because 2 of the 3 factions I play are the limited factions, I'd love to see some casters bring in maybe some of the more maligned pieces which are even less now after the update, but allow you to sort of play with all the models in the faction without hamstringing the faction-defining components. Not exactly the answer to the question he was after, but I think it would be the more direct way of playing a little bit of everything rather than seeing a big swap from all solos to all units to all beasts or whatever.
All right. Well, we're basically at time. I do want to ask, though, is there any topic or anything that you're wanting to close out on, or do you feel like we've gotten things covered?
No, I just want to ask you questions, Jay. That's all. I just want to know, like, actually, I would love to ask you. So, what is the first list you're going to put on the table as a result of this update?
I think that Grim 1 is going to be the first caster I play.
Lovely answer. Awesome. And after you play Trevor Christensen, do you guys have a plan to be playing in the shop again, or is Idaho a bit behind the 8 ball, or what's going on?
So with Gameopolis, we closed down events in the store for quite a while. It was around May of this year that we restarted them. That was the point when all of my employees were fully vaccinated, and so felt safe at that point, being willing to. At that point, I wanted to be sure that my employees were well protected, and then our customers can make their own health decisions, I guess.
Yeah.
So yes, I've been playing some games in my store, etc. So that is something that's happening.
Yeah, cool. And from this update, I don't know how much you've read through it and have had a chance to digest, because I think it will take 3 to 6 months for this to all settle.
Right, yeah.
What are your top 3, or just some of, but hopefully your top 3 models that weren't getting any sort of love or making any lists or any table time that you are really excited to put on the table?
I think that one of them has to be the Krill Warriors / Cabers.
Yep.
Trying to think of what else in Trolls I'm excited with. Probably the Mountain King is another one that I'm excited to get on the table. Not sure he's going to actually be good per se, but still excited to play him.
There is a We Three Kings list, which is which is Ragnar running one of the kings, Magic Zero running one, and then Horgul, his hotshot is no longer for the lights. He can take anything. He can hotshot. I think you want to do on the Glacier King. You can hotshot a heavy, so you can run all 3 plus a stone and the Junior Knot. Would be fun, if not aesthetically pleasing.
And then probably my third answer is probably Gristle 1.
Yes, that's what I was thinking.
Because she's obviously she actually is one of the casters that falls in that category of received a fair number of reworks, it seems like, and there's a lot of exciting things to try out with her. So
plus
I think I will go with that. Yeah, she is.
You can, so I think the thing that is slightly concerning about her is, so if you look at any of the kings, that's armor 19, 21 with the Krillstone, 23 with her Unyielding, 25 with Magic Zero and Bracer, and 27 if you kill something. So that's the point where I'm like, this is a bit silly, but it is super exciting to see her come back out on the table. She is, she's iconic and brings a slightly different dimension to Trolls, especially with Boundless Charge.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yes. All right. Well, James, as always, thank you again.
Thank you for having me. Always a pleasure, Jay. And there is one website on the internet that I love visiting every hour, and that's actually called Discount Games Inc. So I just thought you might enjoy that information there as you wrap up the podcast.
You are a gentleman and a scholar. Thank you to all you guys who are listening. Obviously, you're patrons of the podcast, which means that you are A+ individuals in my book. All right. Well, thank you again, everyone, and have a good evening.
Moops out. Jayzilla out.